All right. So I'm going to show you the scary parts of the brain, but not the parts that are like cut open and have surgery and stuff like that. I'm going to show you stuff that's complicated. I'm going to talk about the stuff that's inside your mind. So it's not just the organ, right? And why would you worry about what's inside your mind? Because our morals never change, right? We know what's right and what's wrong. It's inside your brain, and nobody can change that. But what if they can? So what happens if morals aren't this beautiful, pristine marble statue that is ethereal and everlasting and never changes? What happens if right and wrong changes because of technology? What happens if the stuff that you're building here changes our notions of right and wrong in a fundamental way? Does that make all of you ethicists? Does it make you responsible for changing people's morals? So let me just unpack the book in 3 sentences and then you can take a siesta. Technology changes ethics. Technology is exponential, and therefore technology is changing ethics at exponential rates. That's it. Very simple. But a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people don't think that right and wrong changes over time, so they think, I know I am right. And all the battles we're having today, it's because I sit here and I tell you, if you don't agree with me, you are wrong. What happens if you change your mind? What happens if there was a period of time where we practiced human sacrifice as an instrument of state and religion? And you didn't do that, and then the sun didn't rise, or the rain didn't come. So not only was this legal, it was religiously sanctioned, and everybody thought it was okay. There was, of course, a time when the beautiful squares in Europe were filled with burning bodies because somebody disagreed with your religion or practiced your religion but didn't do it in the right way. And that was considered legal. And that was considered okay. And that was considered fine by the state and by the religious authorities. And of course, you used to guillotine people as a public spectacle in the great plazas of Paris. What were people thinking? How the hell didn't they understand how wrong this was? Or take a more extreme example. One of the worst things you can do to a human being is to enslave them. Anybody here think slavery is okay? I don't see any hands. How is it possible that every single person here knows slavery is wrong, but for hundreds of thousands of years, every single civilization enslaved people? Because the Chinese did it, and the Incas did it, and the Mayans did it, and the Africans did it, and the Americans did it. And oh, by the way, those peaceful Swedes, they named all the countries south of them the Slavic countries, because that's where they went shopping for slaves, right? So what the hell was wrong with these people? And what made us so smart that every person in this room knows this is wrong? Did we become more moral? Yeah. But what else happened? Well, once upon a time, this is the way you got around. But guess what happens when you bring oil into the equation? 1 barrel of oil is 5 to 10 years of human labor. And when you tie that to thousands of horsepower, all of a sudden you don't need giant slave ships. The way you got here today, you use jet engines. Each of those little jet engines is the equivalent of 160,000 people rowing you across the ocean to get here. And then it becomes a lot easier to be moral, because technology gives you a series of alternatives that people didn't have. Now, it's perfectly possible that some of you are so moral and well put together that you would have been in opposition to slavery in the 1800s and the 1700s and the 1500s and the year 1000. But many of you would not have. because your preachers and your teachers and your parents and the economy and the government and the laws told you that was okay. Get rid of slavery, bring in machines, and all of a sudden you get economic growth without having to enslave people on a massive scale in every continent. So you can be better off at the same time as you are a better human being. And many people think of technology as something which is awful. It's the Terminator. It brings death and destruction. And yeah, it does sometimes. But sometimes it allows you to make ethical choices in an easier way. So now let's come to the present. You're all moral people. You're all good people, right? You all know right from wrong. But what happens if some of the technologies that we're discussing here today fundamentally change what we do and therefore your notion of right and wrong? And what happens as those technology cycles get shorter and shorter? Can you end up on the wrong side of right-wrong? For instance, here is a solar curve. It's exponential. Our grandkids are not going to burn fossil fuels because it makes no sense whatsoever in economic terms to not use geothermal or wind or solar. And they will look back at us and say, Grandpa, Grandma, really? You like burned the planet, warmed the planet, and that was okay? So things that we do every day might be seen in a very different light when you have alternate technologies. Things like eating meat. Synthetic meat used to cost $380,000, then $30, then $9, then $5. Pretty soon we may not have to kill 6 billion animals a year. And how do you think your kids are going to look at the entrance to one of the fanciest restaurants in Europe in retrospect? Oh, gee, you went into there, and that's what got you hungry. Oh, yeah, you were a moral human being. You knew right from wrong. What happens if what's okay today turns out to be completely wrong tomorrow? Let's talk about something that one or two of you may think about occasionally, which is sex. Just a rumor. Do you think sex has changed? Well, let's have a conversation with Grandpa and Grandma about birds and bees. And we're going to talk to them about the birds and the bees, but I'll tell you what. We're not going to bring them back as those nice 60-some-odd-year-old people. We're going to bring them back in a time machine. They're going to be hot 20-year-olds. And you're going to sit in one of these bars, and you're going to talk to Grandpa and Grandma about sex. It's an uncomfortable conversation. But you know what? They knew a lot about sex because they were probably married by their 20s. So is sex really different? Is our notion of right and wrong, is our notion of ethics different according to sex? What might be different in this conversation? Well, here's one thing. You know, Grandpa, Grandma, we can have all the sex we want and never have a child. Huh? Yeah, birth control existed, but wasn't very effective. You couldn't buy it if you weren't married, and it was frowned upon. We take the fact that you can have all the sex you want and not have a child for granted. That has not been true in human history. And then you say, Grandpa, Grandma, have a second bottle of wine, and let me tell you about IVF. What the hell's IVF? Well, you take an egg, you take a sperm, you mix it together in a little petri dish, you conceive a child. Huh. You know what? We used to talk about this stuff. We called it the Immaculate Conception. And it was a miracle. And you're telling me now that you can be in Australia and conceive a child with somebody in Germany without being in the same room, in the same country, without touching each other? Do you understand? That would be like witchcraft to your grandparents. And ask them the question, do you think that's right? Oh, hell no. And then, of course, there's the issue of freezing eggs, freezing sperm, having a surrogate mother. Again, normal, natural to us, except that allows you to have identical twins that are born 30 years apart. So you're chatting with Grandpa and Grandma, and you've separated act from consequence, act from physical contact, and act from time. But other than that, it's perfectly normal. Now go back and take a poll and ask Grandpa and Grandma 60 years ago, is it moral to do these things? Hell no. But technology changed our notion of what we can do, what's okay, what's not okay. And your kids and your grandkids are going to continue pushing what you can do with reproductive technologies, and things which look pretty awful to us may look normal and natural to them. What the hell do you mean you took me mountain biking instead of leaving me in a nice plastic bag, isolated with clean air at home? Or you took me on a trip and you got sick on that trip, you exposed me to pollutants, you exposed me to that food, you exposed me to malaria. Were you out of your mind? And that will seem normal and natural to them, but to us, that looks a little yucky. And then, of course, there have been scandals of gene editing babies. How many of you think we should constantly and normally be gene editing our children today in utero? Can I see a show of hands? Not a lot. Maybe 2? Can you understand that your grandkids might get really, really mad at you for not doing that? As it becomes faster, better, cheaper, what the hell do you mean you didn't take out the KRAS gene that I had? Why did you leave that BRCA gene? Why did you leave that P53? I've now got cancer because you were so backward, you didn't bother to enter my genome when I was an embryo. What was wrong with you? Right? And it'll just flip our notion of what's right and wrong again on its head. Because what's wrong today may turn out to be right tomorrow. And as you're thinking about this stuff, in the context of these conversations, as we face really important questions across artificial intelligence, across robotics, across genome engineering, across a series of other technologies, many of which are being created by folks in this room, be very careful with the notion, I am right and I have the answer. Because A, you may not, and B, you may change a lot of other people's answers. And you may end up driving ethics in ways which you can't imagine, because after all you're doing is building a technology. But those technologies may end up creating very different notions of right and wrong and ethics. And that's why when we judge the past and when we judge each other today, we need to bring back 2 words that we rarely use: humility and forgiveness. Those are not words we use in our conflicts with each other, between religions, between countries, between people who have different thoughts from us, between people who have different pronouns, between people who have different religious upbringings. Those are dirty words. Because I'm right, you're wrong. There's no reason for me to be humble. There's no reason for me to ask for forgiveness. And that's a dangerous state of mind as technology gets ever more powerful. So I hope I've unsettled you. I hope I've convinced you that technology actually changes our notion of right and wrong, and that is just as important as brain surgery, because it's changing not your physical brain, but it's changing your mind, and that may have a bigger long-term effect. Thank you very much.